The objective of this lesson is to learn how to write recursive functions. What is recursion? Recursion is a method for solving problems. It involves breaking a problem down into smaller and smaller subproblems until you get to a small enough problem so you can easily solve it. In the context of programming, recursion usually means a function calling itself. To be able to write recursive functions, you should know about the three laws of recursion. The first one says that a recursive function must have a base case. The second one says a recursive function must move toward the base case. And the third law says a recursive function must call itself. Let me clarify these laws by going through some examples. Let's consider that you want to write a function which accepts a positive integer as input and returns the factorial of the input number. Just in case you don't know it, the factorial of n is usually shown by n with the exclamation point in front of it, and it is defined as n times n minus 1 times n minus 2 until you get to 1. For example, factorial of 3 is equal to 6 because it is equal to 3 times 2 times 1. I'm going to write two different versions of this problem. The first version is a non-recursive version, and the second version is a recursive version. Here is the non-recursive version of this problem. I'm defining a function called factorial, and it accepts an input number. In the next line, I am preparing the result, so I put the result equal to 1. Then I go through a for loop, which basically starts from the number itself and steps down by decrementing the number one at a time. So it starts from the number, then it goes to number minus 1, then it goes to number minus 2, and so on. As you can see, the step for this range function is negative 1. And each time in the for loop, it will multiply the result times the k, which is the iteration variable. And once the for loop is finished, it returns the result. And then, of course, I have a main program to test this function. And for example, I pass integer 5 to this function and then print the result. You see that the factorial of 5 is 120. Here is the same exact program in the Python environment, and of course when I run it, it says factorial of 5 is 120. You can change the x variable to anything you want. Let's say what is factorial of 10, and when you run it, it says factorial of 10 is 3,628,800. Next, I am going to write the recursive version of the same function. Let's go deeper and look at the three rules of the recursion in this function. The first rule is that a recursive method must have a base case. The base case is usually the trivial or obvious case for the function, and it allows the recursion to stop. In calculating the factorial, the base case is 1 because it is obvious that the factorial of 1 is 1. The second rule says that you must move toward the base. In the case of factorial, every time that the function is calling itself, the number which is passed to it is decremented by 1. This means that the function is moving down towards the base when the base is 1. And the third law says that a recursive function must call itself, which in this case, as you can see, the factorial function calls itself. Here is the same exact code, and you can observe that if I run it, it says factorial of 5 is 120, and if I run it again with 10, you can see that the result is exactly the same with the non-recursive version. Let me solve another example for you. Let's imagine we want to write a recursive function which accepts a positive integer n and returns the sum of all the numbers from 1 to n. Here is the code for that function. The name of the function is recursive sum, and it accepts number n. The base case is 1. That basically means if the input number is 1, it is obvious that the sum of all the numbers from 1 to 1 is 1. So in that case, this function returns 1. If not, then it goes and calls itself with n minus 1 and adds it to the n. Let's imagine you called this function with n being equal to 10. What is the statement in the return function says, give me the sum of all the numbers from 1 to 9, then I will add 10 to it. Now the function calls itself. So the second time that it goes in, it seems like you call the function with the value of 9. So what it does, it says, well, if I want to calculate the sum of all the numbers from 1 to 9, all I have to do is to know what is the sum of all the numbers from 1 to 8 and then add 9 to it. And as you can see, it is moving down towards 1. So then it calls itself with the sum of all the numbers from 1 to 8, then 1 to 7, and so on. There are some things that you should know about recursion. There are some complex problems that may otherwise be very difficult to solve and may have simple solutions in recursive version. Whenever you write recursive function, you should understand and apply the 3 laws of recursion. And finally, you should think of recursion as an implied form of iteration. What did you learn? You learned about recursion in Python.